federal agency broke its silence. A missing witness finally spoke, face to face, not through a relative, not through a post. A family became the target of a threat serious enough to pull in the FBI. And in the morning, an 18-year-old goes into the ground. For things this family has been carrying, all landing in the same 72 hours, and we're not going to let a single one of them blur into the others. This is true crime evidence. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss stories like this one. Tonight, before that funeral happens, we're going through all of it carefully, separating what's officially confirmed from what's still being reported secondhand. For weeks, exactly why the FBI was involved in this case had only been answered in fragments, a line here, a comment there. This week, the Bureau's Jackson Field office released a full, on-record public statement. It confirms the FBI has assisted with certain aspects of the investigation using federal tools and partnerships, while stating plainly that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office is leading, and will continue to lead, the investigation. It describes a long-standing working relationship between the two agencies and says the FBI has been supporting Jackson County from day one in the effort to find answers for the Wells family. It closes by saying the Bureau remains ready to assist further wherever federal resources might expand local capacity. Let me be very clear about the tone of that statement, because tone matters here as much as content. This isn't a press release announcing a breakthrough. It reads almost like a reassurance, careful and measured, written specifically to lower the temperature around a question that had been generating real anxiety for days. Some speculation had treated FBI involvement as proof the case had been secretly escalated into something bigger. Some treated it as evidence of a cover-up, federal agents supposedly managing the story instead of investigating it. This statement supports neither read. It confirms real federal involvement, tools, partnerships, expertise, while explicitly keeping Jackson County in the lead. It's support, not command, and that distinction is worth holding on to every time this case comes up going forward. Buried inside that same statement is the actual reason federal resources got pulled in at all. The FBI says its efforts have specifically focused on interstate threats received by people connected to this case, running in parallel with the family's own independent investigation rather than merged into it. That's the clearest official confirmation yet of something we've touched on before. Federal involvement here isn't about Nolan's death directly. It's about protecting people connected to this story from threats serious enough to cross state lines and become a federal matter in their own right. Here's what's just as important, though. The statement doesn't specify what those threats actually said or who received them. TMZ, reporting on this same statement, noted plainly that it remains unclear exactly what kind of threats were made or who was on the receiving end. That gap matters, because separate, unofficial reporting has circulated specific claims about threats sent to at least one family connected to a boy who was on that boat. Those specific details have not been confirmed through any official statement, from the FBI, from Jackson County, or from anyone with actual authority to verify them. Let me be precise about that distinction, because it's important not to blur it. We know officially that interstate threats occurred and that federal resources are addressing them. We do not have official confirmation of the specific content of any threat or exactly who received it. There's a reason official statements tend to stay vague on this kind of detail, even when the underlying facts are serious. Naming specific victims or repeating specific threatening language publicly can itself cause additional harm, drawing more attention to the very people the investigation is trying to protect. That restraint, even if it leaves the public wanting more, is usually a deliberate protective choice, not an attempt to minimize what happened. Now, the development that changes the shape of this case more than almost anything else this week. Katie, the young woman Nolan spoke with in his final confirmed minutes on that beach, has finally been heard from directly, not through a relative's post, but through an actual in-person meeting with Christine. According to Christine, what Katie told her does not match the stories circulating from everyone else. That's a real shift from where this case stood even a week ago. Up until now, everything attributed to Katie arrived through intermediaries, a family friend relaying what she'd heard, then Katie's own mother and sister posting to correct spreading rumors. This is, as far as we know, the first time information about that conversation has traveled directly from the person who lived it to the person who needs to understand it most, without anyone standing in between. This is worth walking through carefully, because Katie's actual account is more specific and more limited than a lot of the public conversation around it has suggested. According to Christine, Katie has been consistent from the beginning. She and Nolan met, spent time together, and eventually parted ways. Katie got back on a boat with her own friends, separate from Nolan's group, and assumed, based on their conversation, that Nolan was heading back to rejoin his friend's boat. Here's the detail that matters most. Katie never actually saw Nolan get on that boat. She assumed it, based on what he told her, but she did not personally witness him rejoining his friends. That distinction is genuinely important. It means Katie's account isn't a direct eyewitness contradiction of the friend's story, in the sense of her having seen one thing while they claim another. It's closer to this. Nolan told her his intention. Whether he actually followed through on it before whatever happened next is something nobody, not Katie, not the friends, not the family, can currently confirm firsthand. An honest assumption and a claim that he chose to stay can technically both be true at different moments, if something changed in between. It's worth sitting with why that nuance got flattened so quickly in public coverage of this case. A clean contradiction, one witness says this, another says that, makes for a more compelling story than an account built around an honest assumption. But Katie's actual position, as relayed by Christine, is more measured than that. She's not claiming she watched Nolan walk away and board a boat. She's saying he told her a plan, and she had every reason to believe he'd follow through on it. That's meaningfully different from a direct eyewitness account, and it reframes what actually needs explaining. If Katie's account is accurate, the real mystery isn't whether Nolan wanted to leave. It's what happened in the gap between him stating that intention and whatever came next, a gap nobody has been able to account for. Now, on the threat reporting specifically, separate reporting has emerged describing an actual threat received by a family connected to this case, specific enough in its content that it would qualify as exactly the kind of interstate threat the FBI's statement references. I want to handle this the same careful way we handled it a moment ago. The FBI has confirmed threats occurred and are being addressed. It has not officially confirmed the specific content of any threat or named who received it. Some reporting has attributed detailed threats to a specific family connected to one of the boys on that boat. Until that reporting is confirmed by an official source, the responsible thing to do is treat it as credible but unverified, real enough to take seriously, specific enough that it shouldn't be repeated as settled fact. What is beyond dispute is this. Whoever is sending threats to anyone connected to this case, regardless of what they believe happened to Nolan, is committing a serious crime. Grief, suspicion, and public pressure don't grant anyone permission to threaten a teenager, a parent, a judge, or anyone else. And it's worth thinking about the broader effect this has. Every witness in this story, every friend, every young woman who happened to spend a few minutes talking to Nolan on a beach, is watching this unfold in real time. If coming forward carries the risk of threats serious enough to draw federal attention, that's a real chilling effect on anyone who might otherwise be willing to help. Protecting people from that kind of retaliation isn't just decency. It's directly connected to whether this investigation gets the cooperation it actually needs. Stepping back from the threats, here's where the underlying investigation sits. Following the July 15th meeting between Nolan's parents and District Attorney Angel Mears-Mrath, Ben Crump has confirmed the case will go to a grand jury once the underlying investigation concludes, and that Nolan's phone will undergo a coordinated review, the family's own investigators alongside law enforcement, examining it together. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said this family deserves a thorough, factual investigation, and that's what his office intends to deliver. The state autopsy remains pending. The independent autopsy in Washington, D.C. hasn't produced results either. It's worth remembering how many separate processes are running simultaneously here. The sheriff's investigation, the DA's office working toward a grand jury referral, the family's own independent investigation, 2 separate autopsies, and now a coordinated phone review. Each has its own timeline and its own standard for what counts as confirmed, and it's easy to lose track of which development actually belongs to which process. That grand jury referral hasn't landed as unambiguous good news for everyone following this case. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore has publicly raised concerns about DA Mrath specifically, pointing to what he describes as her office's history in a previous, unrelated case involving a fatal police shooting where he says overwhelming evidence still failed to produce an indictment. He's argued a grand jury referral alone shouldn't be mistaken for progress, and says he intends to keep watching closely so this case doesn't quietly stall the way he believes that earlier one did. A different attorney, Tyler Bailey, has offered a more measured read. explaining that a grand jury referral is actually standard, routine procedure in this county for any death considered unnatural or suspicious, not proof on its own that foul play has been confirmed or even strongly suspected. Both perspectives are worth holding at once. More skepticism comes from real, specific history with this particular office. Bailey's explanation comes from how these referrals typically function as a matter of ordinary process. The referral can be standard procedure, and this office's track record can still deserve close attention. The real test isn't the referral itself. It's what actually happens once a grand jury receives whatever this investigation ultimately produces. Before we get to tomorrow, it's worth briefly revisiting two claims that spread widely earlier in this case, since getting them right matters for how carefully everything else here should be read. The photograph showing Nolan at a pool party, taken as proof he'd been alive after July 4th, was confirmed by Rolling Stone, through image metadata and his friend Tristan Shepard's account, to have actually been taken on June 27th, a week before he ever set foot on Horn Island. And the viral video many believe captured Nolan arguing shortly before he disappeared. Shepard has confirmed repeatedly and directly that the voice on it is his own, not Nolan's. Both corrections trace back to the same pattern. In the vacuum created by two still pending autopsies, unverified claims have consistently outpaced confirmed facts, and that's worth keeping in mind with every new detail in this case, including everything covered tonight. As all of this continues, Nolan's family is one day away from doing something no parent should ever have to do. The funeral is set for tomorrow, Monday, July 20th, at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. Visitation from 9 to 11 that morning, the service beginning immediately after. Reverend Al Sharpton will officiate. There's a detail here worth including that hasn't gotten much attention. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center's own commission voted unanimously to offer their venue for the service. The family ultimately chose Centerpoint Church instead, and the Coliseum responded with real grace, releasing a statement saying they support the family's decision and remain committed to supporting them through this difficult time. A public venue offering itself, being turned down, and responding with warmth instead of any hint of offense says something about the broader community response to this case that's easy to overlook amid everything else. The service will be live-streamed in full on the family's website and YouTube channel, so people following this case from anywhere in the country can witness it as it happens. Think about what that actually means. A funeral is, in almost every ordinary circumstance, one of the most private rituals a family goes through. This one will be the opposite, broadcast to an audience that has spent 2 weeks debating GPS data, contested witness accounts, and viral videos, now invited to witness the actual human cost of everything they've been following. There's something worth sitting with about the timing of everything covered tonight arriving on the eve of this funeral. The FBI's statement, Katie's account, the threat reporting, all of it landed in these final hours before Nolan is laid to rest, which means his family walks into tomorrow morning carrying every one of these open threads with them, unresolved. They'll stand in that church celebrating their son's life while a grand jury referral sits somewhere in the future, while 2 autopsies remain unfinished, while a contradiction about his final conversation stays unsettled even after Katie's own direct account, and while, according to some reporting, a threat investigation continues in the background. Grief in this case has never gotten the chance to exist on its own, separate from everything else. Tomorrow won't change that, even as it gives this family a few hours explicitly set aside to try. So, pulling this update together, the FBI has put its role on the record in full, confirming real assistance with digital forensics, and specifically with addressing interstate threats, while making clear Jackson County remains firmly in the lead. Katie has finally spoken directly, meeting face-to-face with Christine and confirming an account more nuanced than the public conversation has often suggested, an honest assumption about Nolan's intentions, not a first-hand account of what happened afterward. And reporting, still not officially confirmed in its specifics, describes a family connected to this case receiving threats serious enough to be part of exactly what that FBI statement addresses. Tomorrow, Nolan Wells will be laid to rest, in a service his family has built around celebration rather than sorrow, live-streamed for anyone who wants to be there without being there. He was 18. 2 autopsies still haven't told his family how he died. A grand jury is waiting somewhere down the road. And in the meantime, this case keeps generating exactly the kind of pain, threats, hostility, public suspicion that everyone connected to it his friends, a young woman who simply spoke with him on a beach, and now perhaps an entire family, say they never expected to become targets of. It's worth naming the broader shape of this update before we close it out. For different threads, a federal agency forced to explain itself publicly, a young woman forced to become a central witness in a story she never asked to be part of, a family reportedly living under active protection from people who wish them harm simply for their proximity to this tragedy, and a mother and father forced to bury their son under a level of scrutiny almost no family in this position has ever had to endure, all converging on this community at the exact same moment. And yet this week clarified more than it resolved. 2 weeks ago, this case ran almost entirely on anonymous claims and secondhand accounts. This week brought an actual federal agency speaking on the record, a key witness heard from directly rather than through relatives, and a level of specificity about process that simply didn't exist before. None of that adds up to an answer yet, but it's a more grounded, more documented case than it was even a few days ago, and in some ways more honest about what it still doesn't know. This case is not closed. We're going to stay on this story through tomorrow's funeral, through both autopsy results, and through whatever comes next as this investigation moves toward a grand jury. If this is the kind of reporting you want, sourced, verified, nothing added for shock value, subscribe. We'll bring you the facts as we actually get them, and not a moment before.